Welcome back to the Closers Inner Circle podcast. I am Denise Griffitts, here with my co-host, the legendary Bengay III. And today we're continuing our deep dive into sales infiltration from the Closers Part 2. Now, Ben has often said that this is the best sales work he's ever written, and that's a powerful statement given his decades of experience. So today we're going to break it down, what sales infiltration actually is, how it differs from traditional selling or pitching harder. And I think that's one we really want to, talk about today, Ben, and why it changes the entire approach to the sales process. And we're also going to explore the mindset of the master closer, what has to shift internally to use this effectively, how understanding human behavior, that's also a very important, plays a critical role. I'm losing my voice. And whether this is a skill that can be learned or something that only a few naturally possess. And if you want to get the most out of this conversation, be sure to grab your copies of the Closers Parts 1 and 2 on eBay at Ronzoni Books. That's Ronzoni, Ronzone Books, and follow along with us. Then just try one sales infiltration this week and pay attention to how differently people respond in sales and in life, because we're always selling and we should always be infiltrating. And we would love to hear what you discover. So connect with us on LinkedIn, Denise Griffitts and Bengay III, to keep the conversation going, and send us your emails, what questions you have for us. We would love to answer them. And today we are sponsored by Michael Wood. Michael Wood invites you to explore Learn to Love Being You. It's a 10-week journey designed to help you understand how your mind and your body work together to create lasting peace and joy. He will teach you practical tools to heal from past pain, manage your thoughts and emotions, and build a more loving relationship with yourself. That's important. Learn more at learntolovebeingyou.com. Good morning, Ben. I think I mentioned that my voice is giving out, so you get to talk.
Thank you. Joy to be with you. I always look forward to Wednesdays, and you sound in fine form. We're doing sales infiltration. Uh, the and it dawned on me there are a couple of people. I got several questions this week about what made so and so a sales infiltrator. So I thought we'd spend a little time on that, and then uh, from part one, really, although it's in every book I have anything to do with, the personality profiles or traits of various people or types of people. And the real secret there, and I'll touch on this again in a minute, the main secret is being aware that there are personality profiles, that there are different types of people. If you just have that in your mind, you're halfway home, because a lot of it is just common sense. But starting out with sales infiltration, sales infiltrators, and what makes them. Last week we went through a long list of people I've worked with and work for me and so on, friends. And on the long list were three people that I thought if I had to picture somebody and say to somebody, be like that, they would be, in no particular order, Bob Schuler, Robert Schuler, the late great founder and minister of the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California. I've been praying for them all week. There's a chemical problem down there. They seem to think they have it solved, but they evacuated 40 or 50,000 people in case this big chemical tank with 7,000 gallons of something you don't want on you in it,
Yeah, I was reading
heating up.
about that. I
Yeah,
didn't realize that was close to his former cathedral.
yeah. That's now a Catholic church, but the Crystal Cathedral was non-denominational, sort of. It was Protestant, I think, but you never could tell. He just talked about being a good person and Jesus and so on. But when I saw that on the news that all those people had been evacuated in Garden Grove, we have several friends who live down there. Gigi's best friend from childhood lives I don't know, less than a mile from the chemical tank and so on. But what crossed my mind after I got assured that she was all right and evacuated, and some of her other friends, was a 5,000 window crystal cathedral made out of glass. And this chemical tank is close enough. If it blows, I
Oh,
assume it would take out every window in the crystal cathedral.
I I would think so too. And can you imagine the shards flying?
Yeah, it would just be devastating.
It would.
One of the great reasons maybe not to build a church out of 5,000 individual windows, all made out of glass. But anyway, Robert Schuller crossed my mind. Jimmy Rucker, of course, the greatest salesman I ever personally worked with, and my running buddy
I
in
knew
high
you were going to
school.
say him. I knew
Yeah,
it.
I always do. I
Jimmy, you
can't say
owe us
Rucker.
money. Rucker,
I
you owe
can't.
us money. I'm telling you right now. We
I
mention
can't
you
say
all the
Rucker.
time.
Yeah, I can't say Rucker without finishing up that he was the greatest salesperson I ever personally worked with. There may be, I mean, Ross Perot beat his yearly goal at IBM in, I don't, 30 days or something, and they therefore cut off his money. You've reached your goal, you're done a month or two into the year. So he packed up his stuff and went elsewhere and started two other huge companies simply because they screwed him over on his commissions and so on. So Jimmy never sold that much stuff, but I always qualify it with that I ever worked for. And I doubt that Schuler sold everybody ever sat down with, and Rucker did virtually. If they had no money, had no means of getting any money, weren't willing to rob a bank or something, he might have missed those. But very few of those. They found what Jimmy used to say, sufficiently inspired, just about anybody can get just about any amount of money. And he had some extreme examples. I kidnap your favorite child, send you a ransom note, nothing, cut off a finger, mail that to you. Probably the money will start flowing. And he would go on with the story. But short of something bizarre like that, just to prove a point, Rucker closed just about everybody he sat down with. I was talking to him one day after I had established my closing rate and knew what it was, and Jimmy said, "What's yours?" And I said, "Well, apparently it's about 86%, which is what it was the first time we ever measured it, and still is to this day. Uh, I haven't gotten any better, but at least I haven't gotten any worse." But I said 86%, and I was sort of smiling. We were talking on the phone, leaning back with pride. And Jimmy said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I
He did.
said, "Yeah." I said, "I got an 86% closing rate, and you're sympathizing with me?" He said, "Well, you'll get better over time."
Okay,
Uh,
Jimmy, I forgive you the $5 this month. Just that's okay. But next month, when you're mentioned,
and then Ray Considine, the one we talked about last week, where I drove all night to get to his funeral uh, he wouldn't be buried alone, only to discover I got the last seat in the church. And there were also people, I guess they hadn't spotted the one seat because there were people lined up against the walls, standing on both sides. And I discovered that I was not only Ray's favorite person on earth, I got to meet about 500 other of his favorite people on earth. Ray Considine was a sales infiltrator personified. Now, I mentioned those three, and I could add it to the list. But in all three cases, I never once, either watching them work or watching them work on me, Schuler was not immune to asking close friends for donations to the church. And he got me several times. And Rucker, it was mainly watching him. But I did a lot of things for Rucker that I wouldn't have done if Rucker weren't a sales infiltrator. And Ray Considine, who convinced me without making an issue out of it, whatever saying it was just he'd introduce me to people. Here's Ben Gay, one of my very best friends on earth.
Oh,
And
he meant it when he said it.
well, he meant it, but he also meant it with lots of other people because he had that ability. I
Right.
started to mention this the other day when we were talking about Ray at the church. People started getting up and saying things about him. And one guy got up and said, "Well, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said, well, I'm sorry he died, but you'll get over it." And this gentleman who was talking said, "Let me tell you something. I'm never getting over Ray Considine." And again, he was probably like me, probably didn't see Ray twice a year, but he was one of Ray's very best friends and defensive even when being consoled by other people. And here's what they had in common. You never caught them selling.
We've talked
One
about that, and just like, and I'm going to do it for you, so I don't have to correct you. You used to say that, I'm not going to even tell you who it was. You tell me.
Cary Grant,
Cary Grant. You used to say the secret to being a great actor, I'm paraphrasing, is to not get caught at it.
right? And whenever I tell that story, I say, and that's the secret of great selling. Don't get caught at it.
Right.
With Bob Schuler, Jimmy Rucker, and Ray Considine, it never even crossed your mind. You were just talking to a friend about things. Sometimes whatever was being discussed to buy, purchase, sell, be a partner with, or whatever, never even came up when you got down to, at some point the conversation's got to end. And when you got down to that logical end, uh, I don't remember, and this is sort of the point. I don't remember what they said to wrap it up, but it was probably something like, well, let's get this done. And this is sort of interesting because we hadn't discussed this most of the time. We talked about friendships and his wife and my wives, since we're talking about three people, and how their family was doing, how their kids were doing, and the product or the donation or the purchase was the least of it. You wouldn't be talking if there wasn't some interest. It wouldn't have been together to start with. So a good sales infiltrator assumes that, and they work on the friendship part. And a really good sales infiltrator almost becomes an unconscious competent. I don't think sometimes Rucker was aware. After a sale was completed, Rucker never took me aside and said, "Did you see what I said when he said this?" and so on. It was just a conversation with a brand new friend.
And he probably couldn't have repeated it back to you anyway,
Right.
because it seems like it was very much part of his personality.
Hmm. Uncle Jimmy.
Right.
And I forget what I said. It crossed my mind last week when we were talking about Ray Considine. Gigi had never met him. She had, like a lot of my friends, if she hasn't met him, she feels like she's met him because she's heard so much about him. For instance, she's never physically been in the presence of Jimmy Rucker. She's talked to him on the phone a few times, but she knows Rucker's. I'll be telling a story about Rucker and she'll correct me. She kno- she knows the material better than I do,
Script
and
chunks.
loves him.
Yeah, we're gonna go back to script chunks at some point.
With Ray Considine, the first time we went to dinner with him, and as best I remember, there were 6, 8 people sitting around the table. But Ray zeroed in on Gigi because everybody else knew each other, and we didn't discuss it, but I saw what he was doing. He wanted to make sure that she knew she was now part of that group, that she was in. She wasn't the newcomer, and he just couldn't have been nicer to her, as Ray always was. And I told you, he was a tall, handsome guy, blonde when I first knew him, white haired by the end, but he was still I don't know, 6'3", 6'4", straight-backed, handsome in the face, tasteful Hollywood glasses on. Uh, when at his funeral, I looked around at the other people in the room. They were all well-dressed. All, if they wore glasses, all had the Hollywood glasses on. All had their hairstyle, and I'm talking mainly about the men. The women always look nice. And I felt like I was at a Hollywood casting call. Uh, he drew nice-looking people to him, and even people who probably weren't that neat and clean day to day cleaned up for Ray. They didn't want to caught being less than they could be in the presence of Ray Considine. But at the end of the dinner, we're heading back to the hotel or whatever. Gigi said, and she'd been with him probably less than an hour, "Ben, I love Ray Considine." I said, "Well, yeah, he's really a nice guy." "No, I love Ray Considine. I trust him completely. I can see why you love him, and I love him too." And I'm thinking to myself, easy, easy.
Yeah, calm down. Take a breath.
You're
But
married, he's married, calm yourself. But anyway, Bob Schuler, Jimmy Rucker, and Ray Considine all had that ability to, the instant they met you, they made you feel as if you were the most important person in the world at that moment. And I've found in biographies and in personal encounters, whenever you run into somebody who has an effect on people, a powerful, positive effect, phrased a little bit differently in some cases, maybe, but here's the message. When I was with him or her, I felt as if I were the most important person in the world, or the only person in the world. And I tend to talk about men because, you know, off to the side, private conversations for a man tend to be with other men. I'm a woman lover, though, and one of the best I ever met at being a sales infiltrator was Mary Kay Ashley. Uh, she was, I remember going to visit her in her office in Dallas. We didn't know it, but she was nearing the end of her career and her life. But when I walked in, she stood up, came around the table, gave me a big hug, and said, "Ben Gay, I've heard so much about you," and so on. And rather quickly, we discovered she had been a distributor of Holiday Magic Cosmetics, my company, before she started Mary Kay. And I said, "My team brought me the application you filled out. You were a holiday girl." And she said, "Well, briefly, I joined just long enough to get your manuals."
I remember you telling me that, and I thought, man, she was smart.
Yeah. Our
A little
director,
underhanded, but smart.
our director, beauty and fashion, was Ern Westmore, the famous Westmore family of makeup artists. Ern was the dean of Hollywood makeup artists. There was a time at which there was a Westmore at the head of each of the 5 major studios simultaneously. Ern's father, and then his 4 or 5 brothers. I forget who was who and where was where, but they were a huge deal. And when Mary Kay heard that Ern had come to work for us, she joined, paid her fee, got her little sample kit and all, and bought the manuals. And she admitted that's all I was there for. I wanted those manuals. And I'm paraphrasing now, but she said, "If you compare my manuals today to your manuals then, you'd find a striking similarity. In fact, your attorneys might find some plagiarism."
Oh,
But she was one of those people when she enveloped you in a hug. Uh,
right.
I would The day we met in her office, I was head of a company as big or bigger than was bigger than hers at the time. So I was sort of the celebrity, but I didn't come in totally in pink. We weren't in my office. Hers was totally in pink and all of the trappings that came with her. But I felt like I was in the presence of a star who was graciously giving me her time.
I've heard
And
that about her. I know people who are very big in Mary Kay, or
yeah,
were. I don't even know if it's still a thing, to be honest, but and I bought some of their products because they were good products, and, you always support your friends, but whenever they would talk about her, it was with reverence.
yeah,
No joke.
she
Absolute
carried that
reverence.
aura around with her.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's not on the list. I probably should have put her on the list, but technically she never, well, I guess she worked for me. She was a distributor for a day, uh, or as long as it took to get her hand on the manuals. But she probably ought to be on the list too, and that she was a superstar sales infiltrator, and really made you feel. Had she been selling something that day, I'd have bought it.
Pink and
Uh,
all, huh?
yeah, she
You know,
was.
she generated so many tremendously wonderful quotes that are still floating around, they just make such sense.
The one that she's famous for, it actually came from How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. But she used to say, when you meet someone, picture a sign around their neck that says, "Make me feel important."
Mhm.
Now, I'd read that from Carnegie. I'd read it from her. I knew it well. And when she did it to me, it didn't cross my mind that it was part of the system.
She didn't get caught.
No, she didn't get caught. I sincerely thought she was thrilled to have me in her office, and maybe she was, but I also know that was part of the routine. On the other hand, to get to her, the only way I got in easily was she called and said, "If you're ever in Dallas, drop by. I wanna meet you." But I saw other people, being in and around her office for a couple of days. I saw other people arrive at the desk, front desk, and she had people like Marty, my chief of staff. You had to have a very good story to get in to see her. But once you got in to see her, um, she was, she had the magic about her.
Mhm.
Saying that story about hard to get in to see her, Ray Considine came to visit me one day at Holiday Magic in San Rafael, and I wasn't really aware how things were set up. I got there before anybody else every day and left after them, so I really wasn't part of the how you get greeted in the lobby system. And Ray came in and he said, "Let me ask you something. What do you get out of being so isolated from everybody?" Which was a loaded question. If Napoleon Hill had been there that day, he'd say, "Ben, that's not a compliment."
Mhm.
But I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, I come up to the front door, that's locked. I have to explain while I'm there to get buzzed into your outer lobby." In the outer lobby, he said they were all friendly and gracious, but I was being quizzed as to whether I could get into the main part of the building, get out of the lobby. And finally, I talked my way past that because Ray was a sales infiltrator. Yeah, and then I encountered Karen Signorelli. I said, "Yeah, she's a lovely lady." He said, "Well, she's Marty's uh, bulldog in front, gatekeeper." I had to get past Karen Signorelli, and then I encountered Marty, that's Martha Conley, who was gracious and charming, couldn't have been nicer, but it was clear to me I had gotten to the last barricade, and he didn't have an appointment. He just was in town and dropped in, uh, and turned out Marty, of course, had heard of Ray Considine, but she'd never met him. But a few seconds later, my door flew open. There's Marty with Ray right behind her, and she says, "I have a special guest for you." I said, "Who is that?" I could see him. She said, "Mr. Ray Considine." And so he had breached all of the barriers and gotten in. But he said it wasn't easy. But he got Marty, being a sales infiltrator, he got Marty to the point she thought she had won the game by bringing him in.
Aw, and she
And he
was
was,
bringing you a gift.
yeah, yeah. I'm bringing you somebody special.
All
I
right.
expect a bonus. Here's Ray Considine. And Ray walked in. His question, though, was based on that he hit 3 or 4 hard checkpoints before he got in. And he said, it's the same thing when you call here. Uh, I've got to go to the switchboard to Karen Signorelli, to Marty. And so I always get through, but there is that step process. So he said, before I swap my entire system around in my office, tell me what the advantage is of shutting yourself off from your customers, prospects, and suppliers.
And
I
see,
said,
I was just going to ask you that. I'm glad he asked. So, what was the answer?
I was full of myself. I was Ben Gay, head of the largest MLM direct sales company on earth. We were taking in $1 million a day in today's money. That's 3.5 billion with a B a year. And I was 25. That's really the secret to the answer to your question. I was 25. And I had seen movies where it was hard to get in to see the big guy. And I don't remember setting it up that way. It was just knowing my attitude. People
Oh,
around me set it up that way, probably to make me happy.
see, and I
But
was going to ask you if your boss had the building already set up that way, and you just kind of walked into it. It was ready made, but it
I
doesn't
don't,
sound like
I
that's what
don't know.
happened.
No, I don't think so. It was just, I'm Ben Gay, head of this big company, and you're lucky to see me. I think was a
Ah,
big part of the attitude. I told you when I got hired, I said to Bill Patrick, William Penpatrick, I said, I'm honored to become the president, but that's based on sales and speaking ability. I don't know anything about management. And he said, we got lots of people around here who'll cover for you and teach you as time goes on. Don't worry about it. But he said, I think there were about 150 people in the building at that time. He said, that's what the other 150 are for. They add up the figures, they bring them to you, they package the products, etc. What I want you for, he had said to someone, I walked into a room one day where they were watching on video a video that several of us, Zig Ziglar and several people who were out for training, had done that morning. And when I walked in, because I'd forgotten the manual, so I went back to get it, they were standing in the training room with their backs to me, and I heard my voice. I realized they were watching what I had recorded that morning. And Fred Pape, the president of the company before me, said to Bill, he's good. And Bill said, I will pay more for the ability to effectively communicate than any other skill. I did the moonwalk back out of the training room so they wouldn't know I wasn't, so they didn't know I was there.
it's in now that picture's in my head, so I'm going to mute and just chuckle. So,
So I I went to work hard being a good communicator and so on. And then over time they taught me, if you sit in enough board meetings after a while, you sort of figure out what a profit and loss sheet is about and why they have it. And yes, in the beginning I learned to be quiet, but finally I got where I could ask semi-intelligent questions, preferably ones to which I already knew the answer, so I wouldn't nod in the wrong place. But I had been promoted above my skills and ability because Bill really was willing to pay more for the ability to effectively communicate than any other skill, and that I had down. I was a good speaker, knew how to sell, enjoyed being up in front of audiences, and so he got his money's worth. And then gradually, I learned about management. I'll tell you one sort of off subject, but this is typical of what you do when you're not trained. I'm president of the company. Everything's going well. Sales are going up. And all of our trainers, Zig Ziglar, Merle Fraser, and a bunch of other people, were out for training or something, some excuse to have them all together in the building. And Bill or someone said to me, they're driving our travel agent, Connie Fisher at GTS Travel, They're driving her crazy, and she's thinking about quitting. Well, that was an important job because she was moving probably 100 people all over the nation, all over the world to a certain degree at any given time. We really didn't need to lose Connie Fisher.
That would have
And
been a big logistics problem.
yeah, so they're driving her crazy, and it's got to stop and turn to me because I was the new president and call them together and get them stopped. The training room was at the far end of a long building upstairs. I ran, and that's where they were at that moment. I ran the length of the building, ran up a flight of steps. Merle Fraser, one of my great mentors, still with us after all these years, was in the room, and he loves to tell the story. Ben Gay raced into the room, sweat on his forehead, out of breath, and began lecturing us on screwing with a travel agent, and the next person who does it's going to get fired, and so on. It was just the worst management speech ever given to a group of uh, top level executives. They were all making a lot of money. They probably could have said, "Well, screw you," and walked out the door and been okay. So he talked about it was so much fun watching this young man still in the growth phase lecturing us. The youngest of them was 12 years older than me. The oldest of them was 40 years older than me or more. And I'm in my Minnie Mouse voice going, "Hey, if you mess with a travel agent again, it is fired."
Stop doing it, but you didn't give them any, how do I even say this without hurting your feelings? You yelled at them, but you didn't give them any way to solve it, did you?
No, I just
Well,
told them to
okay,
stop it.
that'll work.
Yeah.
That's
What they
like
were
telling a
doing
woman to calm down. How does that
what they
work
were
out?
doing was telling, they book it used to be easier to do. You book a flight or you book 3 flights because 'cause you're not sure which one you're gonna be on. But the one that was driving Connie crazy because it involved her personally was you booked a flight and then changed your mind and rebooked it, and then changed your mind and rebooked it, and every time you did, you called Connie Fisher. So she's got 100 prima donnas flying all over the world, changing their flights, or they booked 3 or 4 flights and just let them pass. If you didn't show up, I don't remember there being any big penalty, but
I
you
was gonna
probably,
say, how much did that cost?
it might have cost something. I really don't remember because I never did it. But um, I'm under the impression it wasn't money; it was driving Connie Fisher crazy that was the problem. And so anyway, that was my travel agency speech that those who that were in that room that are still alive, most prominently Merle Fraser, one of my favorite people on earth, talked to him the other day. He's in a VA hospital. And I thought of you when I was talking to him because he's somewhere in Louisiana, Biloxi. If there's a no, that's Mississippi.
Biloxi's Mississippi, but it's not that far away from here.
Yeah. Anyway, he's in a VA hospital near you,
Oh,
and he used to tell funny stories about my father, who he adored. And when Dad would get into some situation, Merle would try and tell the story and start laughing so hard he couldn't finish it. Well, Ben Gay's travel agency speech is in Merle's repertoire. Let me tell you about this young man. He came racing up the steps, out of breath, tie askew, sweating, and began to lecture us on the way we were going to imitate. I don't have a deep voice to start with, and excited and yelling, it goes up. And I was 25. It's like the time I had lunch with Paul Harvey and Earl Nightingale, two of the great voices on earth. And
absolutely.
I was sitting between them, and Earl go, "Well, speaking as God, here's what I think." And Paul Harvey, and here's the rest of the story. What do you think, Ben? I just don't want to talk. I want to sit here and learn from you too. Didn't want to talk, period, in front of those two. But that was my management lesson and my travel agency speech all wrapped into one. And when Merle Frazier tells the story, although it should be humiliating to me, he makes you the star of the story to the point I would say to people, I've said it many times, Merle, tell them about the travel agency speech because he made me feel good while making fun of me. And Bob Schuler, Jimmy Rucker, Ray Considine, three of the great sales infiltrators I've known, could do that. And then I teased, and probably ought to double back to it, the personality traits, which are in Closers Part 1. And I don't know the page, but it's near the front of the book. Uh, anyway, it's something that all salespeople should be aware of. You don't have to memorize each one. They break down the salesman, the master closer, the accountant, and so on. And then the types of closers and the types of salespeople and so on. But when you sit down with somebody with your pre-prepared presentation, everybody's always saying, "Oh, I don't like scripts. They don't sound natural." As I've said to your group many times, if you've been selling over 30 days, you're on a script. You just didn't write it down, perhaps. You didn't totally memorize it, and you don't really know if it's working or not because you don't know what to measure. You don't know to measure at all, and then you don't know what to measure. So when you're prepared to give your speech, your pre-prepared presentation, there's a difference in giving that talk, that presentation to an older person versus a younger person. I'm not a good customer for salespeople. I'm 83 years old. I have everything I need. So, except for a sale on blueberries at the grocery store, there's not
And
much you
Ginsu
can.
knives at the fair.
Beg your pardon?
Ginsu knives at the fair.
Yeah. Well, that's my addiction to uh, gadgets and good sales presentations. I break a couple $100 down into 20s and start down the road, knowing when I get to the other end of the booths and I've heard all the presentations, I won't have any money left. Followed by Gigi saying, "We already have one of those. We already have 10 of those. Why are we getting another vegetable slice?" Because I want to hear the presentation. Most of them are so good. But I bought my great example. I bought my last sofa. Bought my last bed frame and mattress box springs. We're about to get a new mattress in our bedroom, and the one we have has been there for years, and it's really fine, but it's got a couple of soft spots. So I'm not the guy that you look at and say, "Oh, they've got a nice house. I bet they got a lot of money," and so on. Well, we have a lot of money or not isn't the issue. The issue is I have everything I need or want already. The coffee maker, unless I bang the pot against the sink, which I've done on occasion, I don't need another coffee maker ever in my life.
I
If
need
you
another green pan. I set mine on fire not so long ago.
Well, that can happen.
It
But
melted. The darn thing was plastic. It melted.
the
Anyway, I'm gonna have to buy a new one, but I'm not happy about it.
no, and you shouldn't be buying another one anyway. You probably left it on the flame too long or whatever.
I
But
accidentally turned the burner on. It was sitting on the stove. I don't use the right side of my stove really ever. And I wasn't paying attention and I accidentally turned the back burner on where it was sitting. And then I smelled burning plastic and went, what the heck? And when I went to pick it up, it was just ribbons of black plastic. I cried. I was upset because I use that thing all the time. But, it's gone now.
I like to keep hard-boiled eggs in the refrigerator because I frequently will have one with some toast in the morning for breakfast. And it take from the time you turn on the gas till the time they're done is 25 minutes exactly. And I
Really?
eat, yeah, for me,
I just
and
boiled eggs this morning, but I've got
plus,
I've got a little electric thing. It's a little chicken, and I put them in there, and 10 minutes later they're ready.
well, the gas in cold water at this altitude,
Yeah, yeah.
25 minutes exactly, and they come out perfectly. But I either didn't set the timer on my phone for 25 minutes or it went off and I didn't hear it or something. But Gigi came walking in and said, "Do we wait for all of the eggs to blow up or is 5 enough?"
I knew that was going to happen. You boiled the water out. So,
No water left, just
yeah.
white stuff and some yellow stuff mixed in. So I told her, I said, "Okay, I got 2 eggs done." I always put 7 in, that's what fits. Uh,
Right.
got 2 eggs ready to go. You want one? She said, "No, I'll wait for the next batch."
Did you have to throw the pan away?
Yeah. But when if you're calling on me as a salesperson, you should be aware that if you look around, one, you shouldn't be calling on me, but if you're calling on me because you don't know till you see me or talk to me or whatever, 83 years old, obviously have done reasonably well in life. I've got everything I need.
Right.
And so except for another Ginsu knife, uh, there's really not much you can sell me. I will give people my card and say, "I'm a sales trainer, Ben Gay," if you hadn't heard of me. If you haven't heard of me, by the way, you're not studying selling like you should. But that aside, uh, I'll listen to your presentation and help you, but the odds are overwhelming. Whatever you're selling, I either don't want, don't need, or already have 5 of them. So fire away. And the good ones will say, "Do you mind if I give you my presentation? You can point out stuff." I said, "Absolutely not. Happy to do it." And
Right.
some just walk away, and some are so stupid they didn't hear that I already have one of those. I look at things now and think we have numerous, of course, I don't know when I'm gonna croak, but just on the actuarial table scale, uh, I've bought the last of several things that get used up, but they're not gonna get used up that quick. So I think of that when they arrive or when I see them on the counter or what have you. Those little stickers, plastic envelopes you peel off the back and put them on the back of a package, invoice enclosed in orange up at the top and so on. I don't know why we have any because we don't do that, but apparently at some point we bought a box of 500. It looks like there's 2 or 3 missing maybe. I don't know. The top was disturbed. But I looked at that the other day and smiled, and I said, "If I wonder if there's a salesperson who sells these who would like to try and sell me, because at the end, I'm gonna sell him my 499."
I knew it. You
Yeah.
need to put those down in the warehouse and see if anybody can use them over there.
They
I
don't
mean,
use them.
I know.
Uh,
I know. We use
but
those
anyway,
bubble things.
in the personality profiles, that's one of the things. A major thing is age. Uh, how old is he? Is she? What are they likely to need? If they're Jewish, and there's any way you can figure that out by last name or anything, this is not the time to knock on the door and tell them you have some pork that the person down the street didn't order but didn't take, and so you've got a special deal on it. There's nothing you can say that is going to sell pork to a Jewish person. And although I have several Jewish friends who love bacon
How can you
secretly,
not love bacon? I mean, seriously.
well, pork,
I have a ton of it in my freezer at all times.
yeah, I'm a fanatic. We have Les Davis and Ron Davis, who used to be the vice presidents at Nightingale Conant Earls Company, were both Jewish, and they would not eat pork of any kind except at our house because my first wife, Marcia, didn't know that, and we came back from a trip, and she knew we were coming. I called her from the airport. So when we walked in, there were other stuff, but also the world's largest platter of bacon.
Ooh.
And they started laughing, and one of them said, "Well, what the hell? Let's try it." And they each had some, and they said, "All right, you can never tell our wives or our friends." I wouldn't even tell them the story if they were alive now. "You can't tell our wives, you can't tell anybody, but this is good stuff." And between the two of them, they just about ate a 6-inch tall platter of bacon. And anytime they came to visit or were in town, they'd always say, tell Marcia some of that bacon would really be nice, but you won't make a living selling bacon to Jewish families.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, so make a note. I'm talking to a person who's 85. I'm talking to a woman. I'm talking to a whatever, an accountant. You sell an accountant, it's not foolproof, it's not everybody you ever talk to, but you sell an accountant differently than you sell a pilot. Pilots tend to be a little wilder, especially if they came out of the Air Force. Danny Cox, an old friend of mine, sales trainer, speaker, was first of all a pilot in the Air Force. Then he was a test pilot. Then he got into selling by being the sonic boom salesman. His job was to go to communities that were complaining about jets breaking the sound barrier over their homes and breaking out windows. He became the sonic boom salesman. His job was to tell them how patriotic it was to put up with broken windows and loud noises and so on because they were helping to save the nation and so on. But his story that I always loved, we said, "Ben, do you know how to tell when you're in a room with fighter pilots?" And first time I heard it, I said, "No, how?" He said, "They will tell you." So if you're in a room with a fighter pilot trying to sell them, he or she will tell you they're a fighter pilot.
That's
They're
their
very proud.
identity, isn't it? And
Yeah,
that's
they're very
smart.
proud of it.
Yeah.
And they tell you that, and it therefore adjusts how you address them. There is like when I was working with the astronauts, they were a fun bunch. The launch crews over in mission control were not a fun bunch. They were engineers, and they had pocket protectors, and most of them wore glasses and had military type short haircuts. Never saw a hippie among them. Meanwhile, roaring around the vehicle assembly building were astronauts in Corvettes with scarves tied around their neck. Looked like something out of a movie. Same industry,
Apollo
same
13. I
location.
instantly thought about Apollo 13. I think Tom Hanks, and I can't remember who he played, but he was driving a Corvette that kept breaking down.
Their Corvette was fine to that. There was a Chevrolet dealer in Cape Kennedy, then Cape Canaveral. Now they call it the Space Coast. But if you were on flight status, a lot of people were astronauts, never flew. At some point, figured out they never were going to fly. They didn't have their wings, but they could say they were astronauts, part of the astronaut corps. But if you
Right.
were really on flight status, had gone or were about to go, this guy gave you the use. He didn't give you the car, but gave you the use of a Corvette while you were in that area on flight status.
Mm,
It gave a real flyboy uh, attitude and atmosphere to the
yeah.
whole thing.
Well,
But
that makes sense.
that was 10 or 15 people at any given time. Meanwhile, over in the vehicle assembly building and in mission control, with these people that all look like you have to be a certain age to know this, but look like Wally Cox was an actor that played Mr. Peepers or something like that. Glasses wound tight, very little sense of humor. I hope Jim Harrington has listened to this. He was my dear friend who got me in with the astronauts, and he was the head nerd. Uh, the just a different type of character. So if you were calling on Jim Harrington to sell him encyclopedias, You would sell them entire same book, same price, same everything, except different people. You would sell him entirely different than you would sell Jim Irwin or with Apollo 15, the first one to drive a moon buggy on the moon. So be aware that they are different people. There are fun accountants, but not many. There are dull pilots, but not many. And every category, every age group, every religion has characteristics you should be aware of, and they alter your sales presentation. They alter the script chunks that you pull out and use at any given time. And the good ones, Jim Irwin got out of the astronaut corps and went and started a thing called Operation High Flight. It was very religious, born again Christian type. And at the prime age, because I kept saying, Jim, I got to get you into selling. At the prime age for selling and hello, I'm an astronaut and so on, he would have wiped him out and he dropped dead of a heart attack.
Oh,
Way too young, and would have been one of my he was a very good friend, but over time, he would have been one of my very best friends ever. A great guy. He's the one I asked him when they left the moon, he was heading back and they circled the moon, then came up and experienced one of those Earth rises. You've seen pictures that capture almost the same thing. Moon's down at the bottom, and over the crest of the moon is the Earth, and that's what you see. Final shot of Earth as you're leaving the moon. And I said, my God, how did that feel? Because one of the photographs that's famous, they all look very similar, but one of them that's famous with the Earthrise is one he took. I said, how did that feel? And expecting some braggadocious comment, well, I worked my whole life and I became a test pilot and blah, 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 blah. Instead, he said, Ben, I was struck by my total insignificance. And that was 3 or 4 decades before they got the cameras that now show we're not alone.
right. I don't think we are, to be honest. Jim Lovell, when you said Jim, it came to my head. That's what Apollo 13, that's who, what's his name? Tom Hanks was playing, Jim Lovell.
Oh, was he? I didn't know that. I don't think I ever saw the movie, oddly enough.
It's a good movie. I'm not a Hanks fan, but it's a great movie.
Jim Lovell was one of those superstar type guys. He was gracious and warm and knew his stuff, greatly respected by people. One of the things that NASA that comes up frequently, what is your flight experience? Because they judge it not whether you went to the moon yet or circled the Earth yet. What they want to know is when trouble came. Neil Armstrong was famous for this, one of the great pilots that ever was at NASA. When trouble came, how did you handle it? That's in fighter planes. When he was landing on the moon, they didn't have, they were down to 15 seconds of fuel. The computer wouldn't put it down where they wanted to, so he had to take it over and land it himself. He admitted to me later that he really wanted to take it over and land it himself. They were not happy sitting there like robots in a can, having everything done for them. They were used to flying things, but great people. So back to selling, if you call on an astronaut, understand you're talking to an adventurous person who's lived and is living out on the raggedy edge. If you're talking to Jim Harrington, head of the manned space program, I forget his total title. I think I've said it to you once before. But if you're talking to him, form a bowling league, and because that's what his idea of fun is, to bowl in a league. That's really exciting. Jim Irwin, you'd have to hog tie him and put a gun to his head to get him to join a bowling team. He want to, where's the plane? Where's the plane? So they are different. And in selling, They rise up through the ranks. They're order takers. They're salesmen. Maybe they become closers. Then they become a master closer. And then somewhere in there, probably without even knowing it, the really great ones become sales infiltrators. They're the ones you don't catch selling. You automatically know, like, trust them. You feel safe with them. Whatever they say, you can assume, but you also assume at the time that's the truth. You can take it to the bank, as I said, with Schuler either asking for money, Rucker selling things, Ray Considine selling services. There was someone, it might have been Dr. Napoleon Hill, was in my office one day, and Considine and Wade Cannon, one of his running buddies and also one of my mentors, were there, and they were reading something. Well, what they were reading was something. It's that time when he said, "You use a lot of exclamation marks." And Dr. Hill said after they left, "Ben, that wasn't a compliment." Anyway, uh, Ray Considine and Wade Cannon sitting there, not a word was said to us. They were working on some paperwork. On the way out, they put the paperwork on my desk. They were marking up copy I had written, and they put a check, invoice on Marty's desk. And I'm making up numbers I really don't remember, but I think it was $4,000 or $5,000 today. That would be $40,000 or $50,000. Put it on her desk, and she took it back to accounting, had a check cut, and handed it to them. Never was it said to me, it's going to be $4,000 or $5,000. Never did they mention an invoice. Marty didn't question them. Everybody trusted them. And although there was no check request with it, when Marty went to accounting and said, "I need a check made out to Ray or Wade or both of them for $4,000 or $5,000, I said, "Of course," and paid it. Those are sales infiltrators. There would be people selling, sweating bullets. How do you ask for $4,000 or $5,000? I didn't do anything. I just sat there and made notes on a piece of paper that was already written. Surely to God, that's not worth it. Was worth it, every penny of it. But I could see some salespeople saying, "Surely to God, that's not worth $4,000 or $5,000." Or today, $40,000 or $50,000. Didn't cross their mind. They didn't ask. I didn't question. Check was cut and they were out the door. That's a sales infiltrator. They've earned your trust. And in closing on that subject, I'll just remind you of Jim Pearson, the guy who I met when I was doing sales training for the company that developed this area and several other real estate developments. Uh, when I met him, he was one of those people, he shook your hand and you'd been his friend for life. And I won't tell the whole story, but the gist of it is when we decided we were going to move for other reasons, uh, this is where we came, because several years before that, Jim Pearson had convinced me that I could trust him, he wouldn't lead me astray, etc. And now we're coming up on 3 generations deep. I've been here 50 years. Me, Gigi's family's been here 100 years or more, but we're coming up on 50 years from me, based on a 3 or 4 minute conversation and a handshake from a person who was a sales infiltrator. And the weird punchline to that is, indirectly, I was a lot of help to John Pearson in recommending him to other people. But he and I never did any business together. None. I never bought a piece of property from him. By then I was hooked up with somebody else. It was his trust that had me move 136 miles and change my entire life around and start a whole new industry, the call center industry. That was all based on a sales infiltrator's handshake.
I mentioned at the very top of the show that I guess my question was, human behavior. And the kind that you're talking about, sales infiltrators, they're natural at it, whether it's a skill that can be learned or something that only a few naturally possess. And all of the people that you've been sharing with us today, it was natural to them. And you explained why and how it
Well,
was natural to them.
well, as I told you about my swimming class, when I was a counselor at the YMCA, some or better learn quicker, etc. But if I did my job, at the end of the season, they were all swimming pretty much equally. The super duper water birds were probably still number one and two and three, but the others learned to swim. I was not. I was funny, had a good personality, and wasn't afraid of talking to people. But I was not a sales infiltrator till I studied Rucker working, which made me double back and study my father. He'd never heard the
Right.
term, but he
I
was
knew
a
that.
sales infiltrator.
Right.
So it can be learned, but it's certainly easier for someone who's a natural at it.
And I have to ask you, you mentioned Merle Frazier many times in this show, and you said he's close to me here in the Deep South. If I were to call him and visit with him, would he tell me stories about you?
He probably would, but Merle's a little past his prime. As I said, he's in a VA hospital, and part of that is physical and part of it is mental.
Mm,
So I can still tell when he answered the phone, I could still hear Merle Frazier talking, uh, but we're missing a step or two. Tucker
gotcha.
the same way. Jimmy was supposed to be interviewed for the book that Jason Williford is writing about me, my
Yeah.
biography, and he turned down the opportunity. And I called him. I said, "What's wrong with you? You're refusing to." He said, "Ben, I don't hear like I used to hear. I've lost a step, and I wouldn't be accurate in telling stories from 60 years ago." And that was
Wow.
he saying, I've hung it up.
Well, that's just sad. Well, if
Well,
Merle
that's
Frazier
what
ever
happens
wants a
if you.
friendly voice, you tell him to call me anyway.
I missed that.
If Merle Frazier ever wants to hear a friendly voice, you tell him to call me anyway.
I'm not waving it off. Next time I talk to him, I'll mention it because he would love you, and he taught me so much. But Merle was sort of like Rucker and the others we're talking about. Uh, he didn't study it. He was just a good Southern gentleman
Hmm.
who loved the game of selling. But he wasn't one of those that I learned, say this, do this, do this. He was one I just learned by watching him. He was a
Right.
younger version of my father. They sort of looked alike. They wore the same type of clothes. They were both clothes horses. And so they hit it off the minute they met each other. I was thinking, hello, Dad, I'm your son. I'm still standing here. Include me in the conversation.
This is my adopted brother. I get it. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for joining us on the Closers Inner Circle podcast. We really appreciate you being with us here every week as we break down these powerful concepts from the Closers Part 2. And take what you learned today and put it into practice in your own conversations this week. And I want to thank our sponsor again, Michael Wood. Learn more about him at learntolovebeingyou.com. He's got a great program over there.